Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Jonathan Maiullo, Student Development Advisor for CR's Adult and Community Education. And now here's your host, Paul Bressound.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm your host, Paul Bressound, and today we're speaking with Johnny Maiullo, the Student Development Advisor for Adult Ed at College of the Redwoods. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
As I always start out with my guests, what does your title entail?
Well, it's fairly rich. It's three-pronged, I suppose, for adult ed. Mainly, I'm working with students, right? So that's the student part. Development advisor, I talk to them about classes. I connect them with classes, resources. Mainly in adult ed, I'm working with students who are learning English as another language. I'm working with students who are trying to acquire high school equivalency. And we also have classes in the Humboldt County Correctional Facility. So I work with students who are currently incarcerated there. And then there's the community ed side, which are more vocational classes. And so I do some advising, but that's kind of a split house. So there's really another team that focuses on that. I just kind of promote those classes too.
Now, community ed to me draws up this image of, the community, people from outside that aren't
Sure.
full-time students that are able to take some classes. Are they taking them, except for the correctional facility, of course, are they taking them here on the CR campus?
These classes are all at our downtown campus, which is kind of a well-kept secret.
Yes.
It's at 6th and D, and we have 3 larger-sized classrooms there. We also have free childcare for in-person classes, and then we also have online classes, too. For just about all of our classes are available in both modalities.
So people can take them online at the site at 6th and D or online from their home?
Either way.
Either way?
They can take them online at home, or if they needed to get set up with computers. Really our primary focus is just getting rid of barriers to education in every way. And because we're smaller, we're a little more nimble, flexible, we're kind of able to work one-on-one with students to help them get whatever support they need. So if, for example, they needed a computer to take an online class, but then they needed a place to do it too, well, we could help them out with both.
So give me a demographic of your students. Who are your students that are coming out of the community, that are coming down to this well-kept secret in Eureka?
Yeah, good question. I mean, because it varies quite a bit, right? So we have a number of students that have recently arrived in the area, sometimes recently arrived in the country, that are looking to learn English so that they can have better work opportunities, maybe pursuing education. And then, of course, we have students that are looking to go to school after maybe quite a long hiatus. We work with a lot of different community organizations, for example, like folks that are in treatment, folks are maybe homeless, that are kind of thinking about classes and aren't really too sure where to start. Well, our classes, because they're free, because they're non-credit, because no grade is reported, they can come in, try those classes out, and maybe start to get a feel for education, start to build up that sense of what is it that I'm after, what do I want to study, and what can I get out of this individual class, which is something I really appreciate. I've worked on this campus for 4 years, and it's like a lot of students don't necessarily know why they're pursuing their education, right? So it's nice to foreground that for them.
Help me understand how an agency goes ahead and makes a contact or lets that person know who's involved in services in that agency that this is available to them.
I mean, I don't want to boast or anything, but that's mostly what I do.
You can boast. That's why we have you on,
Okay.
is to tell us about this.
Well, I mean, maybe I could at least say that I'm not doing the greatest job with it, but just because I've got so many other things happening. But I do try to reach out to a number of local community organizations and such, and say, hey, I'm working with adult and community ed, and we have these classes. Would you like me to come and talk about them to your staff, or just drop off some flyers? Just because they're pretty far-reaching, and again, they're very easy for students to enroll in and to kind of use as a springboard potentially into more classes. And then again, especially where getting high school equivalency is concerned as well, just because we have so many students that are coming to us and saying, I don't have high school equivalency yet. I mean, you'd be surprised. Some of them are already taking college classes. Some of them have been working very long times, and they discover, oh, wait, this is a hurdle that I never quite overcame. And so, we work with quite a few different organizations just to get that word out. And then a lot of people just kind of come to us as well. So
Let's go back to the high school equivalency part. I taught high school for 30 years in Eureka. 28 of them in Eureka.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah. There was no wear and tear, I'm sure. Anyway, how many people are out there seeking high school equivalency? That kind of shocked me when you said that there were a number of folks looking for that. Is that an actual class you offer, or is that something people can drop in and do?
Yeah, I mean both, right? Because our class model is sort of drop-in model. You can join classes at any time, so you wouldn't have to be prepared at the start of the semester, right? Like if you come in mid-semester, you're more than welcome to attend the class. The high school equivalency model is that we have support classes, again, both online and in person, that are preparing students for the tests. And we're sort of revising the way that we do that now, but more or less what happens in the class is that the instructors will ask the class, well, which of these 5 subject tests are you the most concerned about? And let's focus on that, which, as you can imagine, tends to be the math test.
Sure.
Meanwhile, I work with students a lot to say, like, okay, if you're concerned about the math, let's hold off on that one, but like, why not try just tackling the reading test right now? Because what we found is in the past, students would get in these support classes and they'd build up this comfort level, but they would continually be, ridden with test anxiety. And so when any kind of talk came up about, well, let's start taking the test because that's how you're actually going to get high school equivalency, it would be like, well, I think I'm going to hold off. And so I try not to be too pushy, but I tell students, well, you have 3 attempts per subject per calendar year. Like we can start taking these tests and get you comfortable. And 9 times out of 10, I find students really surprise themselves with their ability to pass the tests, which is really the goal anyway. A lot of people, I think, still have this mentality from high school maybe where they think, like, I have to go in and like ace these tests. I have to get a very high score, and it's just not really true because, again, high school equivalency is more about getting rid of that barrier, right? Like, let's get this out of the way so we can move on to the next thing. So I think we try to present it more like that. Like, let's just kind of get past this so we can move on to what's next.
Are you an actual testing center? Do you have the ability to give the tests?
Yep. Yeah. So
and then, I'm sorry.
I would just plug really quick that we have the tests 3 times a month. That's the 2nd and 4th Thursday. The 2nd and 4th, we have them at 9 a.m., and then we have them the 4th alone at 7 p.m. as well, just for working folks. And most of our classes tend to be later in the afternoon, early evening anyway. So.
And another nuts and bolts question. If indeed I pass 4 of the 5 parts of the high school equivalency and my year runs out, is that a calendar year? Do I get to start?
Doesn't make any difference at all.
I've got 4 in the bank. I don't have to do all 5 the next time?
They don't go away.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great service to help people do that. Another great service is the teaching of English. Tell me about that program and what that's like.
Okay, yeah, glad to. As recently, in the last couple of years, it's been pretty well revised. Earlier, we had, as many schools over California, adult ed schools do, offered non-credit ESL classes that were kind of without in any kind of, well, they were amorphic, right? Like, here's just a couple of classes you can take. You can take whichever ones you'd like for whatever purpose. And we found, I taught these classes for a number of years, that students would just take the same class over and over again. Often they'd stay with the same instructor, which I know for me personally meant teaching the same class in name, but then changing it every semester. So basically creating a new class over and over to accommodate the students that I knew would be there. And you always, in English classes, language classes in general, you're always going to have varied proficiencies. You're going to have some students that are, intermediate high level, and you'll have other students that are beginner, maybe, even true beginner, very, very little language. And we didn't have any way to to give these students any sort of like accommodations testing or anything to see like what class they would best fit into. We did before, but that was quite a while ago now. And so what we did as a department was got together and decided like how can we make a more viable track, because what we were seeing is those students would stay with the same instructor, they would take the same class over and over, but eventually something would come up. Employment, I don't know, maybe just something to have them move out of the area, or maybe they simply just got sick of doing the same thing over and over again with no kind of concrete result to it. Yes, their language is gradually improving, but again, the course outline is still saying the same thing every year. So every time they're taking that class, they're essentially taking the same aspects of language to practice over and over again, and you could see how there wouldn't be a lot of market improvement there.
Let me call time out here because I have some questions. First of all, you said that they're a non-credit class. Is that correct? Okay, so when you talk about accountability in a class, as far as even kind of like the word prerequisite, you take this class and then to take the next class you have to. So if you don't have credits, you don't really have that system, correct?
No.
And so then if I'm a student and obviously the greater language skills are the reward for what you get. But I mean,
very intrinsically motivated for students.
Right. I mean, but is there are there places, whether they be jobs or other programs, that need to see some sort of certificate of completion or credential or something like that?
Yeah.
Diploma.
That's a great question, and I've actually tried to get. I have the same question, right?
Right.
But as near as I can tell, and I've tried to have our new certificate program, because ultimately that's what we developed, was a certificate program with a concrete end. You earn this ESL certificate, and I'm looking into, well, how is this valuable, right? Because statewide, there's not really a lot of need for it, because generally, okay, if you're going to community college, maybe you have, slightly faltering English skills or something. There's not really anything that they require to show that, like, well, you've done this, so you can take these classes. It's really at your own discretion. So, as far as some kind of a statewide system about the value of these certificates, we're not quite there yet. But I think it is a good place to be. I think we should see a lot more value in this certificate that says this person is bilingual now. They have a different first language or other languages, and now they also speak English. But yeah, employment-wise, education-wise, it's not really a requirement. It's really just more for that student's understanding that you've reached this point now.
I know for the high school level they do have a certificate of bilingualism in this county.
That's true. Yep.
The
seal of biliteracy, I think.
There you go. I don't. But the question to me is, when you say statewide, this seems like a very unique program. And is it a unique program? Are other community colleges running programs of this nature?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I think that a lot of community colleges, adult ed programs are doing really, really great things, especially in California with English programs for speakers of other languages. But I am particularly proud of ours because we have it set up so that students can begin either as beginner level students or intermediate level students, so we can meet them where their ability level is and not either bore them if they're intermediate and start with beginner level classes, or overwhelm them if they're beginner starting at intermediate, and then allow them to decide which direction they want to go. Are they studying English for academic purposes? We have a track for that focuses more on reading and writing ultimately. I mean, after getting the 4 skills of reading, writing, speaking, listening down, then we focus a little more on reading and writing, because these students are obviously going to be focusing more on academic work, which is reading and writing heavy. But then we also have a communication track, which is more focused on using the language in active settings, so pronunciation, listening, and speaking skills. And they choose which one they want.
Would that be the difference of somebody, the communication skills, maybe somebody that wants to go into the workforce, as opposed to the reading and writing, somebody that wants to go and continue on with a college education?
That's correct, yep.
Does CR, when they, okay, so I'm a person that finishes the reading, writing, does CR recognize that I've already been at CR in taking these programs?
In a sense, because these students are registered students, right? So for one thing, like it's much easier for them to sign up for credit level classes. And then of course they're working with us too, so we can help them to make that transition. We also, when I worked with the English department, we started to build a English 1A class that focuses on issues in multilingualism. So when these students start their credit journey, they can start with a class that almost everybody needs, English 1A, and come to it with already having some of their background knowledge privileged in that class. Like, okay, we're going to read about multilingual situations that you've had experience with, so they can speak to those and maybe feel more comfortable explaining their positions as they work on their composition skills. Excuse me, but in terms of like any recognition of that certificate, like that's the sort of thing that we're still working on. But again, it's not required anyway. So like we're creating the certificate program more for the student's own sense of accomplishment, of satisfaction. Like I have now reached this point, because it's a very real part of language learning, right? They call it language ego, where you always feel like you are still at that kind of 3-year-old, 4-year-old level, and even when you speak a second or third or fourth language very well, when you go to speak it, you might be intimidated by a situation. You might feel like you're not expressing yourself as well as you can in your first language, and so you might kind of start to clam up. And so a lot of what we do is getting students to feel very comfortable using English so that they can go on to work or education and feel comfortable using that language and then excel that way. And that's why we do this magazine. It's called Personas. It's a multilingual journal which is open to all the community to submit to, but our students also submit to it quite a bit too, so that they can see that their writings on their experiences are valued by the community, and that they bring those different perspectives in. So some of the writings in here are in English, some of them are multilingual, some of them are just monolingual in another language. Like you can see there's Hebrew, there's Hmong in here, Spanish, etc. Just to kind of focus those students back on the sense that like you already know a language. You've already got the same ability that everybody else does. It's just you're working on learning this language. English now is your target language. Just because we are first language English speakers doesn't mean that we have any kind of, anything that you don't have. You are first language Hmong, Spanish, Hebrew speaker in these cases. So.
I never thought that we applauded and recognized the tremendous achievement that being multilingual is.
Totally.
It's extraordinary to be able to communicate and to learn and to get by, produce in 2 languages. Let's go back to, not in tracking, just counting. Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea of how many people go from your program into the academic setting at CR? And do you have an idea of how many people from your program go through the communicational aspect of it into the workforce successfully in Humboldt County?
Yeah, so we're working on that. Like I actually have a support ticket right now with IR, our institutional research wing here at CR, to sort of get a better sense of that. We did just really start these 2 tracks in the new certificate program last year, so it's only really had a year to go. And so far we haven't awarded any of the new certificates just because we haven't had any students successfully complete the whole program in a year. Generally for students it would probably take about 2 years, although I think if you came in at an intermediate level and you really wanted to take quite a few classes, I think it'd be 5, you could do it in 1 year. But as far as the sense of like how many students have gone from one to the other, unfortunately, I don't know that. I know it, sort of anecdotally from the students that I've worked with that have been interested in these classes. I've worked with students that have definitely gone over to some other community ed programs, other adult ed programs that are more vocational. Our medical assisting program, for example. So I talked to English language learners about that class, and quite a few have been interested, and quite a few have applied. They haven't all gotten in because it's a lottery. But when I was teaching in ESL and in English, I found it was really effective to be on both sides of non-credit and credit. So you would continually kind of entice the students that were prepared into the credit world. And when I was doing both of those, sort of straddling that line, I mean, I could see for myself, okay, this student was in my ESL class and now they're in my English 1A class, and that was incredibly rewarding. And we still have that pipeline set up. But again, it's really only, the knowledge only comes from the students that I've worked with to help put them in those classes. So it's not as many as I would like to see, but it is happening. And for those students, I think it's a really important and valuable transition, because you see that they're making this huge leap. I mean, just imagine being in another country long enough to become comfortable enough with the language to take college level classes. I mean, that's quite a feat, and one that, again, I hope that we are striving to do the best that we can to acknowledge, because as you said, multilingualism is usually regarded as just like something almost innate to people, right? Like, oh, you speak a couple languages, why don't you come on down and do some interpretation, some translation for us, and we'll give you a couple bucks over minimum wage because you already have this ability. No, I mean, everybody who
That's
knows...
That's an amazing skill.
Right?
You should be one of the most valued workers that there is.
And I've seen so many jobs posted that just offer abysmally low rates of compensation for people to do what is an incredibly difficult job of something that's like, simultaneous translation, for example. When people are doing that, they're doing something amazing with their minds that very few of us can do, and it's not honored enough. It's not well regarded enough. It's not compensated well enough. And so we also hope that we're contributing to that conversation as well. Like, what are we valuing in our community, and why, and what are we maybe not paying enough attention to?
So, I chuckled there when you were talking. It's almost like you're luring them to the credit world. I like
Yeah, I mean, I'm a student development advisor, Rashad. The development is maybe, I hope it doesn't have that sort of bait and switch kind of quality. I mean,
it's got a realism to that bait and switch. I mean, do this and you're going to be better off in this system, in this society. There's nothing wrong with that. How many people, as you were talking, you said you were talking about the last 2 years and not having enough graduates. I mean, obviously, it's just started really back up in earnest after the pandemic.
Pandemic and such, yeah.
But how many people do you have coming through the ESL program?
Quite a few, but you have to remember too that in adult ed, there's repeatability. So some students will repeat classes still. We'll have students that will just come in and maybe they'll take a few different classes, and then maybe something will come up and they'll maybe lead those classes and then they'll come back next semester. So it's much more fluid than the credit world. But I mean, we can say that our beginner level class consistently has probably about 30 to 40 students regularly attending it. Yeah,
and that's how often do they start? Are they on a semester?
Every semester.
So a semester system?
Yep.
So that could be 40 students to start a semester, and you could have half of them could be new in the second semester, and half of them could have moved on to the. Wow, that's tremendous.
The idea, of course, being now that every student will attend a class for at least 28 hours, because that's where our threshold is set to get a credit for that class for the certificate, so that they'll stay there long enough to understand enough of the course content to be able to move up to the next level. But again, we don't have any sort of prerequisites in place. I mean, students can take whatever class they feel suits them, but again, that's where my position comes in, to talk to the students about, okay, how do you feel about this? And generally, students are inclined to downplay their language ability anyway. And so, that, again, so much of our job is just getting them to feel comfortable with the sense that maybe they're a little bit higher than they are in terms of their self-perception as far as language ability, which kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier with like bringing students into credit classes. It's like, they're going to consistently see themselves as like maybe not quite at that level, and it's kind of our job to say, no, you're ready. Let's move up to the next stage. Let's get you in the classes with credit students and contributing to this conversation now, so that they can grow.
It would seem to me that the prerequisite would simply be to speak another language other than English and have the interest to get in, and then, like you just said, it's your job to find the appropriate entry-level course for them to take. Do you interview?
Yeah, when students come to my office, I will sit down and ask about their expectations and what they would rate their language ability in English, and then I'll talk to them about options. I ask them if they're interested in getting high school equivalency, because then for some of our English language learners, that's also of interest, because that can be kind of a barrier to employment. And so if they get that high school equivalency from this country, from this state, it can be helpful. So we'll talk about those things, but then a lot of the conversation is also, what's your ultimate goal here? Is it employment? Is it a better career situation, or are you interested in taking credit classes, and then making sure that they're supported throughout their journey.
A final question. Are you getting feedback from the community where they're saying that, they've had some of your folks come out, the first few that are coming out, and that they're ready for the workplace, they're ready for the college, they're grateful for the program, they see a difference being made?
That's actually something that I'd really like to strengthen more, is to have those community partners, especially in terms of employment. Every May now we're going to have a certificate ceremony in reading from the journal I mentioned before. And I'd really love to see community members, especially employers, come out that are interested in hiring multilingual folks, because we will be minting them. I mean, they will be coming out of our classes and ready to go, some of them into the workforce. And I think that's a resource like no other for places that are interested in hiring them. I can only say from my experience as an instructor that when I've seen these students move into the credit world, they do exceptionally well, because they've been working so hard to learn a language that I think for them, in some ways, credit study is not at all unfamiliar. In fact, it might even be a little bit easier than working on a language.
Well, there you go. You hear that, Humboldt County? Minting bilingual workers and participants in programs ready to happen. There's a lot more to talk about, but we've run out of time, Johnny, and maybe we'll have you back, because this is fascinating. I'd love to hear some of the results sometimes as you're starting to be able to track the student success a little bit better. So that's about all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank my guest, Johnny Maiullo. Thank you for joining us. It sounds like a great program. Where can people pick up personas?
Well, we have them in the libraries. They're on campus, and they can always contact our office at 333 6th Street and pick one up there as well.
There you go. The best kept secret education is no longer a secret. We'll see you next time on Community Voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for joining us on Community Voices. If you represent a nonprofit that is interested in being a guest on Community Voices, email info@accesshumboldt.net. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.